3, 4.
Hello, and welcome to Phuckery. Thanks for joining us here again. Today, I want to talk about the logical fuckery of rabbit holes. Have you ever been down a rabbit hole? I certainly have. I've been down a few. Um, and I found it very hard to untangle how what I was hearing was not true. Because I always seem to have evidence. They always seem to be giving me evidence of why these things they were saying were true. And I couldn't really untangle how what I had heard might not be true because I'd seen the receipts. Apparently, I had evidence. But back in 2008, I lost my job due to the financial crash, and I came across a movie called Zeitgeist, a documentary. Now, this gave me explanations for how all this had happened and for how all this was the plan of a cabal of people who were inventing money and controlling the world, and it was all about control, that these people just wanted to control everybody and me, and that's why it was all their fault. And no, Zeitgeist had some facts in it, and these facts were given as evidence of the narrative that had been built up before that. Then you could look in the world and see that these facts were true, and you're like, oh my God, that's true. As though that made everything that was said true. But as I said, I found it hard to untangle myself from these rabbit holes. Found it hard to figure out why what I was hearing wasn't true, because here were the facts, here was the evidence. And then I went and I learned about psychology and logic and philosophy, and it gave me tools to untangle some of this stuff. And some of this stuff is hard to hear because you have to face that you've been wrong, and nobody likes being wrong. But really, we should like being wrong, because it's better to learn now that you're wrong than where you were before that when you were wrong. So at least learning that you're wrong makes you kind of less wrong. But that's not how it appears to us, and we hate being wrong. We hate being told we're wrong, or having to analyze our own thinking and figuring out it's wrong can be annoying too, especially when you really, really believe something to be true. I'm sure you can see how this is problematic in today's world with social media and the narratives, and I'm sure everybody can see that there's a growing problem. One of the things I learned was called the fundamental attribution error, and this is something that we're all prone to doing. And the fundamental attribution error is basically how we appraise our actions and how we appraise the actions of others, and how we do that rather differently. When we appraise our own actions, we're really empathetic and understanding towards ourselves. And when we appraise our own actions, it's because of the situation made me do this, and these are the forces involved that made me do this, and this is why I did this, and it's because of this or that made me do these actions. But when we appraise others, it's often, oh, that's because there's something inherently wrong in that person. That's because they're bad. That's because they're evil. That's because they're an asshole. Or, you know what I mean? We fundamentally approach the issues differently. As an example, imagine you're going to work. Imagine you had a bad morning. The kids were a nightmare. You woke up late. The hot water wasn't there, so you had to have a cold shower. You're 10 minutes late for work, and you're going to be late for a meeting you have at work. So you're racing down, you're racing through traffic, you're cutting in here, you're cutting across people, you're driving a little aggressively, and all the time in your head it's like, I'm sorry, I'm late, it's not my fault, I can't, the kids are a nightmare, it's like I've got a meeting, I have to go, and it's all the situation is making me act like this. That's your justification to yourself. But then, let's say a week goes by, and you have a good morning. Kids were great that morning. You woke up early. You're 10 minutes ahead of schedule going to work, so you're nice and calm. Lovely music on the radio, and somebody cuts across you and pulls in front of you and races onwards. And what comes to your head? What a freaking asshole! What a jerk! I can't believe they did that. It's like there's something inherently bad in that person that made them do that. You don't instantly think, oh, maybe they're late. Maybe they had a nightmare morning with the kids. We don't give the other people the grace we give ourselves, you know. I remember hearing this. I remember the lecture that I was sitting and I heard it, and I instantly kind of wanted to push it away because I knew it was true and I knew I did this. I was very guilty of this type of thinking. So I was like, fuck. So we went away and have to analyze it. But understanding this and kind of bringing it into yourself gives you a better view of the world. It gives you a better view of others and of yourself. You can be more empathetic to others. You can say, okay, maybe there's a situation or a context that made somebody act like that I don't understand. And maybe it gets you to analyze your own thinking and take a bit more responsibility for your personal behavior. You know what I mean? To take a bit more control of your own agency. But that's one, the fundamental attribution error. It's worth looking up. It's worth understanding. It really is. But another one, and I see this as very prevalent, and maybe at the end you'll understand and see it as prevalent too, and it's called affirming the consequent. Now, the logical structure of an argument is like this. If P, then Q. P, therefore Q. So if P happens, Q always happens. P is happening, conclusion, Q is happening. That's a logically valid structure of an argument. So if P, therefore Q is a premise, and P is another premise, therefore Q. Okay, so you can think of it like this. If it rains, then the ground will be wet. It is raining, conclusion, the ground is wet. Or, if there's somebody at the door, my dog barks. There's somebody at the door, conclusion, my dog is barking. Now, where the fallacy happens here, where affirming the consequent happens here, is when you go, if P, then Q. So Q, therefore P. So, if it's raining, the ground is wet. The ground is wet, therefore it is raining. If there's someone at the door, my dog barks. My dog is barking, therefore there's someone at the door. Do you see how there's a sleight of hand here where they sound logically valid, they seem logically valid, but they are not logically valid. They're guilty of a fallacy called affirming the consequent. And this is how that happens. If there's somebody at the door, my dog barks. My dog barks, therefore there's somebody at the door. But that doesn't follow from the original statement. The original statement says, if there's somebody at the door, the dog barks. It doesn't say, every time the dog barks, there's somebody at the door. And if you have a dog, you know that every time the dog barks doesn't mean there's somebody at the door. But if there is somebody at the door, the dog will be barking. Okay, so like, if it rains, the ground will be wet. The ground is wet, therefore it rained. Well, no, maybe sprinklers came on. You know, maybe someone was washing their car. Maybe there's other reasons for the ground to be wet, just like there might be other reasons for the dog to be barking. Do you see how this is tricking people into certainty, into a feeling of certainty? Comedy plays with this a lot, this kind of subversion, and we all do it, and it is funny. Like if you see somebody with a wet patch on the front of their trousers, you can say, if you peed your pants, you'd have a wet patch on the front of your trousers. You've got a wet patch on the front of your trousers, therefore you peed your pants. But we all know people are likely to spill coffee on their pants, or maybe turn the faucet on too high, or from the drinking fountain they splash a bit of water on themselves, but we can make a joke out of it and say act like they peed their pants even though we know they don't. It's the same fallacy at play here. The inference is going the wrong way around. So if you peed your pants, you certainly would have a wet patch on your pants, and that can be certain. But just because you have a wet patch on your pants, it cannot be therefore certain that you peed yourself. But you see how we play with these fallacies for jokes, and it's funny. But you can think how religions and stuff have played with these as well. If you imagine back in ancient Greece, and they had all the stories of Achilles and the Titans and the gods and all this, and then they went around and they actually found dinosaur bones. And for them, well, these dinosaur bones, they're actually Zeus's leg. That's what's happening here. That's Achilles' toe there. That's what that big bone is. Well, there definitely was giants. Look, there's proof. So it's something like, if mythical gods were real, then we would find large bones. We have found large bones. Therefore, the mythical gods are real. You see how this little sleight of hand can build certainty and can compound certainty that isn't actually true. It's just the narrative is built first. And then you get these facts, which are actually facts in the world. There definitely was big bones found, but they did not make certain that there was mythical gods, but it felt to the people who were finding them and the people who were told this, and then they were shown the bones and they're like, see, it's definitely real. Another way you can think of this, do you remember when we used to tell ghost stories when we were kids, and we'd all be sitting around in the dark and somebody would have a torch up on their face? They'd be telling the story about the axe murderer who escaped from the asylum, and he went around this very town killing people with his axe, and every time he'd go into family homes, they'd hear a knock 3 times, and then the axe murderer would go in and kill them all. And then somebody would do the knock, and everybody go, oh my God, that's a knock. And for a moment we were fooled into certainty that the knock meant the axe murderer was at the door, because we had been filled in with the narrative, and then we were given the fact there really was a knock, but that didn't make certain what was placed before that. The inference was the wrong way around. Do you see? Am I making sense? I hope I am. You can imagine working in an office, okay, and let's say there was a story going around about a guy or a girl, and it said, oh, they never wash themselves. They're incontinent and they soil themselves all the time. They smell and they're dirty. And then that person goes to the sink. And let's say they're prone to putting the spoon under the tap and it splashes, and it happens every time. And next thing, they're walking away from the sink and they have the wet patch on their trousers. The people who've been previously filled in with this narrative, they look at that and they see that as confirming what they've already heard. Oh God, look at them wetting themselves. Oh, they're dirty, they're disgusting, that's rotten. It's not a joke anymore. Because people actually believe it. This is problematic in our society today, that people are actually believing these things, and it's just not funny anymore. It's just not funny. Now, I don't want to go attacking people for being wrong. I don't want to have a battle of facts where, we try to overwhelm each other with facts, because facts can be used to stitch bullshit stories together, as I hope I've explained here. But that's a really, really important fallacy to learn about. It's called affirming the consequent. And if you learn about it and then you analyze your own thinking with this knowledge, with this structure of arguments, then you'll see that a lot of the inferences are going the wrong way around. And you can untangle yourselves from a lot of that. As I said, religions have used this. Social media knows us so much better. You think social media doesn't understand these structures, the algorithms that outrage us all the time? Fill them in with a narrative and then give them something that seems to confirm that narrative. And then people are even more outraged and they engage even more with whatever content you're putting out there. It's a problem. And you think bad actors from other places that maybe want to cause disruption in the society, you think they don't know how these logical structures work and how people can be fooled into certainty? It can cause civil disobedience, civil unrest, how it can cause infighting amongst people because people think they're right. People think they have proof. People think their certainty is valid when it's simply not. These narratives, they give simplicity where in truth there is complexity. There's complexity that's often beyond our understanding or comprehension. And all we can do is make the best out of it while always being in a place of uncertainty and ambiguity, that we know what we know, but that doesn't make everything certain when it comes to narratives, and that has to be guarded against. And learning logic in this way can really help that. It can really help that. Okay, so I think I've gone on enough. I hope I've transmitted something useful here. So the two things to look into yourselves if you're interested in this kind of thing. The first one is the fundamental attribution error. And the second one is the logical structure of arguments and the fallacy being affirming the consequent. Okay. Thank you, folks. Thanks for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, etc. All that other stuff. Thank you. 2, 3, 4.